Hello, I'm Jake Kelly. Welcome to my channel. All guns that I'm going to be using today have been cleared and the ammunition shown are dummy rounds. The series of videos is intended for those who have or are considering getting a handgun, but really have no basic knowledge of them. Those with experience might be more interested in my video, Optics for Beginners, if you haven't yet acquired that particular skill, or target-focused shooting, for a non-optic but also a non-traditional approach to close-in target engagement. I've divided this particular presentation into two videos, and this is number 2. The first one covered some rather basic ground in the areas of safety concerns, revolvers, semi-automatic characteristics, and shooting techniques. This one assumes you have a familiarity with those topics and will focus on preparing to go to the range and on some useful live fire exercises. As I've mentioned previously, I'm a well-experienced user and have participated in numerous advanced training classes, but I really would not consider myself a trained professional. Hopefully, the tips and techniques that have benefited me over the years will prove helpful to you as well. So now you have a gun, and you're comfortable with the basics of its operation. What's next? An outing to the range. But before we go to the range, there's some at-home prep that you can do that'll help things out. First of all, targets. The National Shooting Sports Foundation has free targets available on their website. It's at nsf.org/shooting/targets. nssf.org/shooting/targets. I suggest that you scroll down past the more complex targets and just download the basic bullseye target. Print it off, fill in the 9-point ring using a Blackmagic marker, and then make a bunch of copies. The end result should look something like this. Okay? We're not trying for precision. We want a nice, viewable target that we can use in our beginning exercises. Next, read your owner's manual. Every gun is different. There's always some little nuance or specific to it amidst all the warnings and the safety tips. So read your basic owner's manual. Then clean the gun. Purchase a basic kit. Clean it before you go to the range. You want to make sure that your gun is clean and lubricated, but not heavily over-lubricated as some manufacturers do prior to shipping. Dry fire. This can certainly be done at home. Make sure there's no live ammo anywhere around, and then practice working the gun to get a feel for the mechanics involved. A few hundred dry clicks is not going to hurt a modern gun. Tape a target in a safe direction on the wall so that you can practice sight alignment and sight pictured as covered in part 1 of the video. Take a breath, let out half, steady on the target, press the trigger home. With revolvers, you need to get a feel for the length and pressure needed to rotate the cylinder, lock the action, and then release the hammer to fire. This can be a fairly, again, everything is unloaded. This can be a fairly long trigger pull, and it's not always the steadiest. As the cylinder is rotating, the hammer is going back, you finally get to a point where the trigger will go forward and fire the round if the gun were loaded. So you want to get a feel for that. You want to get a feel for it, and you want to try and make it a smooth action as best you're able to at this particular point. If your gun is a semi-automatic, you want to practice inserting an empty magazine with the gun closed. Rack the slide. It should lock back. That's the way they're designed today. Release the mag. Put it to one side. Release the slide. You can either release the slide by pulling it back to the rear a little bit and then letting it go forward, or most guns today, most semi-automatics, will have a slide release or slide lock release lever on the side. Point the gun in a safe direction, push the slide release lever down, and the slide should slam forward. Again, you want to check your owner's manual. Some manufacturers don't want you to do that. They prefer that you use the slingshot method of pulling the slide to the back and letting it slam forward, then releasing that. Others don't care. Check your owner's manual to see what your manufacturer, their position on that particular issue. Okay, so again, you release it however you do. Take your sight picture, check your sight alignment, and then once you're all set, press the trigger slightly, and the gun should click. If the gun is single action only and has a hammer, the trigger press will be very short. Notice that it takes almost no press at all for the hammer to release and if the gun were loaded for it to fire. On the other hand, if the gun is striker fired or it has a double action mode for the first shot, then, even if it is cocked, the trigger has a longer travel to go to reach the wall to then release the first shot. Either way, using the technique that we've just described a few minutes ago will allow you to practice reloads and gain familiarity with how your particular trigger feels as it builds to that certain point and then breaks to release the hammer or the striker to fire. Ammunition. You can't make an omelet without breaking eggs, and you can't become an experienced shooter without sending rounds downrange. Get 100 rounds of basic range ammo. For 9mm semi-autos, I recommend 115 grain full metal jacket or plated rounds. They chamber easier than do the heavier alternatives. You don't need anything special, and you certainly don't want to use personal defense ammo, which can run $1 a piece. If you intend to use the gun for personal defense, then you definitely should fire a few rounds of that style ammunition at some point to see how it functions and feels in your gun, but not for entry-level training. Tools. Cardboard to back the targets, based on your range setup. Masking tape to mount the targets and to cover holes in the targets so you don't have to keep replacing them quite so often. Tools to adjust sights if you feel comfortable doing that. If so, remember, always move the rear sight in the direction you want the bullet holes to move, or the front sight in the opposite direction. Also, don't forget eye and ear protection. At the range, remember, there are 4 safety rules. Treat every gun as if it's loaded. Never allow it to point at anything you're not willing to destroy. Those 2 definitely apply to this, quote, unloaded gun you're about to unbag at the range. Keep your finger off the trigger till you're ready to fire, and be sure that your target and what is behind it are important as you begin to handle a hot gun. Many new shooters are casual about gun safety when they first get to the range. Don't you be that guy. If the gun is new, expect it to be a bit stiff. It'll take 100 rounds or so for it to break in and smooth out. That's normal. For a revolver, load all chambers all the time. For a semi-auto, I suggest you download the mags by 1 or 2 rounds. New mags with new springs and a new gun do not always function smoothly. Back off just a little bit for improved reliability. With a new semi-auto, the slide may not always want to go all the way forward into battery. It may hang up just a little bit, maybe kind of like that. If it happens to you, hit the rear of the slide and it should close. An occasional hiccup in the first 100 rounds or so is fine. But if the problem persists, you may have an ammunition or chamber problem. I do have a couple of videos out, Canic Failure to Feed, that address this particular issue. Range exercises. Many new shooters go to the range, set up a target at 5 yards, and then blast it to pieces. That's fun. It does help break in a new gun, but it does not really help develop shooting skills and build confidence. We need something a bit more structured for that purpose. What follows are exercises that I've found useful from a number of introduction level courses. Hopefully they'll be useful for you as well. Ideally, they should be administered by an experienced shooter helping you along, but they're certainly doable all by yourself. First up, aim shots. Don't forget your eye and ear protection. Range is going hot. What I would ask you to do is take single aim shots at a bullseye target from just 5 yards away. This should be done freehand, not braced. The point is to learn how to shoot. Aim at the black dot each time. Don't adjust where you're aiming based on where you see the bullet striking the target. Shoot a group of 5 shots if you've got lots of ammo. 3 if not, that'll be fine. What you want to do is work to gain the smallest group possible. If your shots are scattered with no real pattern, then you've got some basic fundamental problems going on here, and I suggest you review the shooting fundamentals from video 1. Basically, what you're trying to do is have a relaxed balanced posture, kind of like you're preparing to throw a punch, facing the target, feet shoulder width apart, dominant foot slightly to the rear, weak side slightly to the front. Good balanced posture. Obtain good sight alignment, then put the aligned sights on top of that target so that they're centered on the black dot in the center. Get a good sight picture, press the trigger, don't jerk it, and then repeat. This is a MIST chart commonly found on the internet that attempts to show you what your problem is based on where the impacts are occurring. I find it to be really kind of limited use at this stage. Keep working on these exercises until all the shots land within the space of a closed fist. Remember, what we're trying to do is break in both you and the gun. Once you're feeling comfortable with this and the groups are nice and tight, move to 7 yards and repeat the exercise. That'll make it a little bit tougher because you're 2 yards further back. Again, work until the group is less than the size of a fist. Then move back to 10 and repeat again. Now, statistics indicate that personal defense is normally within 10 yards, but try out groups at 15 and 20. See how far your groups open up. Again, we're learning about yourself and you're learning about the gun. Okay, so you've been working on the fundamentals. It's kind of coming together. You've got some reasonably tight groups, but they're not really in line with the bullseye. Let's say, for example, your target looks something like this. A nice, relatively tight group, smaller than a fist, but it's not really lined up with the bullseye. You'd really like to have that move over to the right, and you'd like to have it move up some. Okay, what do you do about that? Well, first of all, give credit where credit is due. Your base fundamentals are improving. Otherwise, they wouldn't be a nice tight group like that. So that's good news. That's goodness. The gun's working well, you're working well. Something's not quite right. Either the sights are off or your sight pictures are off. Adjusting sights. Most revolvers fixed rear sights. On my J-frame here, you can see the rear sight is just a trough that's cut in the top of the frame. On the other hand, on my Glock, if you look at it, there is a channel that is cut in the slide, and the rear sight is mounted in that channel and can move laterally, left or right. So let's assume that you have decided that you want to make a lateral adjustment on the gun. Remember, in this situation, we need the bullet strikes to move to the right. You always move the rear sight in the direction you want the bullet strikes to move. So we need to move the rear sight to the right to accomplish that. So what we do is we take a pencil and then mark in that slide area on both sides with the pencil where the base of the sight meets the frame of the gun. Mark both sides with a pencil. Then we get a punch and get some black tape, electrical tape. Put the black electrical tape over the bottom of the punch. This is so that we don't damage or mark the slide on the gun. So basically you're doing something like this. Hold it like that so that your hand is holding the gun, slide pressed firmly against the mat on your table, and then holding the punch in an upright position. Take a hammer, tap a couple of times on the top of the punch. Lightly, you don't want to murder it. Then look at your gun. And what you should see, if you're moving it at all, is if we're driving this to the right, then on the left side, I'll start to see a gap between the pencil mark and the base of the sight. On this side, I'll start to see the pencil mark being covered up by the base of the slide. So that way you can tell how much you're moving it. It doesn't take much. Just cover up the slide or just cover up the pencil mark. That's enough for now. And then try again and shoot to judge your effect, the effect that the change that you have made has made on where your sights are hitting. What you're looking for is something like this. You want to have a situation, we didn't change the height. What we changed was the lateral adjustment so that it moves over and be under the bullseye. And that way we know that the left-right adjustment is correct. Next, we then consider vertical adjustment. That's going to be more challenging. You can't just slide it to the left or the right. We need to go up or down. What you may want to do is replace it, because you can drive it out. It's easier. And then replace it with a new sight that's either higher or lower, depending on what you need to accomplish. In this case, I want to move the strikes up, so I would need to have a higher rear sight. I want to move it in the same direction as I want to move the strikes. Okay? Or I can build it up. I can build it up by putting JB Weld on top of the rear sight. Or if I need to take it down, I can Dremel it down. Now, this almost starts to sound a little ridiculous, but let me tell you, it does work. If you look at this gun, this is a perfect example. I Dremeled it down, and I Dremeled it down too far. And after I Dremeled it down too far, I built it up with JB Weld, smoothed it over, polished it over, and then I cut the channel with my Dremel the way I wanted it. The end result is it's perfect. I get perfect shot groups. However, again, it wasn't the easiest thing in the world, and I wouldn't do it to an heirloom gun. But a gun that I'm going to shoot in competition in 4,000 or 5,000 rounds a year, absolutely, because I can always buy a new sight and replace this one if I need to. So it can be a good solution. However, there are still other solutions. Remember, the only thing that's wrong is it's either hitting too high or too low. Left and right, we already took care of. So one of the things that you can do is what they call apply Kentucky windage from back in the frontier days. Shift your aim point where you're aiming. Don't aim at the same place. Adjust your aim based on where the shots are hitting. Okay, here's what I'm talking about. If you're going to change your aim point, instead of aiming at the bullseye, where you know the bullet strikes are low, aim above the bullseye. Then the strikes should be right in the bullseye. Next up, controlled pairs. I want to move back to 5 yards because we're going to be shooting the second shot of the pair a little bit fast, and that's going to open up our groups a little bit. Controlled pairs are where you have an aimed first shot followed by the second shot as soon as the gun settles from recoil. You may or may not have an accurate sight picture for shot number 2, but you should always have a good sight picture for shot number 1. So the first shot is aimed, the second is taken as soon as the gun stops moving. You got to be careful. The tendency is going to be want to push the shot and shoot it early or jerk that trigger. You don't want to do that. You want a smooth press. So from the draw, slowly, if you have the equipment and the range allows, or from low ready if you don't have a holster or it's not allowed or you just aren't comfortable with that yet, what you want to do is get used to bringing the gun up, acquiring the sights and a sight picture, and then firing with a smooth trigger press. And then as soon as the recoil settles off and the gun settles back into position, press the second shot immediately. Bring the gun up, acquire the sights, sight picture, smooth trigger press, and as the gun fires and then recoils and settles, press the second shot. You want to do multiple pairs. Do this from 5 yards, then 7, and then 10. Check your groups. If both hits are within an area the size of an open hand rather than just a closed fist, that's pretty good. Remember to fire number 2 as soon as the gun settles. This is not an aimed single shot exercise. Fire number 1, and as soon as the gun settles, press the shot and fire number 2. The goal is to find your distance where all paired shots are reasonably grouped, say an open hand, but where if you move further out, you must take the time to aim the second shot. Next up are reloads. Revolver shooters, go take a break. They have it easy. For most of them, just open the cylinder, dump any used cartridges, refill the chambers, close the cylinder, you're good to go. Check your user's guide for any needed additional details. There are advanced techniques for competition shooters, but that's not something that would apply at this particular level. For semi-automatics, let's first practice with an empty magazine. Take the gun unloaded, clear. Take an empty magazine, carry it with the bullet end down and to the front. The reason for that, when you take this out of a belt or out of a mag pouch, you want to reach down with your hand and have your index finger on the front edge of it so that when you bring it up like this, it's ready to insert the gun like you're pointing your finger into the mag well. So at any rate, you want to have the empty gun held with the bullet end lined up with your index finger. Turn the gun slightly to the side so that you can see the opening. Insert the magazine into the gun using your index finger to point it in the right direction. And then take the finger off as you press with the palm of your hand and press, not slam, the magazine home. Now take aim at your target, get your good sight alignment, place it over the target, get a sight picture, pretend to fire the gun. It's not cocked. We haven't racked it. There's no ammunition in here, obviously. So nothing happens. We're doing a practice with an empty magazine, right? So we take the empty mag, we insert it, we acquire a sight alignment, sight picture, pretend to pull the trigger, or pretend to fire. Nothing happens. That's cool. And then what I want to do is release the mag. Well, to release the mag, you take your thumb and you push forward and you press the mag release. People like me have short fingers and short thumbs. I can't reach the mag release. You may or may not have that situation as well. If you do, how do you handle it? Well, what you do is you get your finger off the trigger, get it clearly and visibly outside of the trigger guard. Keep the muzzle pointed down range. Turn your wrist 45 degrees so that you can see the grip. Then rotate the gun in your hand, just like that. Not quite as severe as that, but just like that. So it's like this. Rotate it like that. When you do that, your thumb is now positioned over top of the mag release. You can press it and the mag will drop free. Then take your next mag, insert it, and then once that is done, use your support hand, rotate the gun back into position so that you have a good grip. Notice my finger is still clearly and visibly outside of the trigger guard. Keep it safe. All right. Reorient the gun, get your sight alignment, sight picture, put your finger in the trigger, and fire the shot. Practice. You can do this at home with an empty gun and an empty magazine, and just keep practicing that until you start to feel comfortable with it. Keep looking at what you're doing and practicing. Now, when it comes to live action, the drill will want to take easy, slow, safe. Load your magazines to 1 or 2 rounds less than full. Take one magazine, put it down on the table or in your belt so that the bullets are facing away from you on the table, or in your belt, they're facing down and facing to the front. Either way, so that when you pick it up, your index finger is going to be on the front where the bullet tip is. So I'm going to put this one on the table and take this one. All right. So now this is with live ammunition. I'm using dummy rounds, obviously. And just to show you, this round has already been fired. You can see the little dimple in the primer. They're all dead rounds. What I do basically is just take some empty cartridges and then put a dead primer in the bottom and put a bullet in the front so that I've got dummy rounds to use. But at any rate, so you take your magazine with live rounds, now we're at the range, and insert the magazine, and then load and make ready. So insert the magazine number 1 into the gun, make ready by racking the slide. That loaded around into the chamber, and it cocked the hammer. And in this case, what I want you to do, if you have one, is put the safety on. Get used to just pushing it up with your thumb. Your thumb is right beneath that safety. Just push it up. It'll click into the non-firing position. The gun will not fire with the safety in that position. Your gun may not have a safety, so this is something you do if you have the safety. All right? And in this case, want you to then holster the gun if you're using a holster, or if you're not, just put it at low ready so that you have grip on the gun, finger alongside the slide, not in the trigger guard, and you're holding the gun at low ready. Raise the gun, bring it up, start to acquire a sight alignment, and as you do so, With the thumb, you click off the safety. The gun is pointed downrange, almost on target. You're bringing the gun up, you're acquiring the sights, you're checking for sight alignment, and you release that safety. It is now in the fire position. You then transfer that sight alignment onto the target and acquire a good sight picture. When you have the good sight picture, then you put your finger on the trigger, prepare, and then press the shot. Of course, I have dummy rounds and nothing's going to fire, but we'll pretend that the gun cycled at this point. If it cycled, the hammer would have been cocked. It would have ejected the old round and loaded a new round into the chamber. I'm going to do my reload action. I'm going to turn the gun in my hand like I did the Glock, press with the thumb, and I'm going to let the magazine drop to the ground or onto the table. I'm going to take from my belt the other magazine, finger near the tip of the bullet, and look it into the bottom of the mag well, and then push it firmly up with the palm of my hand. Then rotate the gun down in position. Notice the finger is out of the trigger guard. Thumb on position. Acquire sight picture. Finger onto the trigger. Press the shot. Okay, so I fired 2 shots at this point. I fired from each of the rounds, and again, the action would have cycled, would have cocked the hammer, loaded another round into the chamber. So since there's another round in the chamber, simulated in my case, actual in yours, then at that point, I want to make sure to put that safety on. Now, at this point, I can holster the gun. It's safe. Or I can put it on the ground, on the table. Make sure it's pointed in a safe direction. Go find the magazine that I dropped out as part of the reload that I just accomplished. Put that in my belt or on the table, wherever I'm staging. And now I'm ready to repeat the exercise. Repeat the exercise. I'm going to put this on the table. Repeat the exercise. Bring the gun up. Safety off. Fire. It racks. Drop the magazine. Insert the next magazine. Fire. Okay? And so by doing this, stopping each time after you've fired 2 shots, putting the safety on before you then go get the old magazine off the table or off the ground wherever it fell, and putting it back in your belt or onto the table. Okay? And you just keep repeating this exercise over and over and over again until you feel very comfortable with it. And it will become comfortable after a while. So just keep doing that. Fire 1 shot, reload, fire 1. Pause, put the gun on safe, put it down if need be, get everything structured right, look at your target if you want to, get ready, go to low ready or in the holster, draw, safety off, fire 1, drop the mag, reload, fire the second shot, and keep going. Okay. Now, point shooting versus target focus shooting. Again, this would be something you'd probably want to do from, say, 10 yards. 5 yards is a little too close. 15 to 20 yards is a little too far away. The object in point shooting is you bring the gun up and you don't acquire sight alignment. You don't acquire sight picture. You bring the gun up and you point the gun like you're pointing your index finger, which if your index finger is along the slide, it should be fairly natural. I'm going to pretend the target's over there. I bring the gun up, I point the gun at the target, and I press the shot. Bang. All right? And then I wait till the gun settles down. I fire the second shot. Bang. You could do this 2-handed grip. You could do this 1-handed grip. The key is, in point shooting, you do not bring it up for sight alignment. You do not acquire a sight picture. You press the shot when it is pointed at the target. What I'd like you to do is do that with 3 shots. So basically, take the gun, have your target out, you're out at 10 yards, just go 1, 2, 3, like that. And then go check the group. How was your accuracy? Now, it may look cool, but it's not really that safe. Remember rule number 4, be sure of your target and what's beyond it. How can you be sure of your target and what's beyond it if you're not even looking at it? You're not looking at the target over the gun. You're just pointing the gun like you're pointing a finger. So, it looks cool, not really totally safe, and you're not going to be that accurate, I don't think. Let's shift now to target focus shooting. That's different. You bring the gun up towards the target, and you look down the barrel of the gun, but what you're doing is looking only at the target, and you're using peripheral vision to verify the sight alignment. Now, 5 yards, no matter what you do, the sights are going to be aligned. You look down the barrel of the gun, the sights are going to be aligned. 10 yards, yeah, half the time they're going to be aligned, half the time maybe they're off a little bit. 15 yards, sight alignment's starting to get to be a little bit more important. But the point is, you can do that with peripheral vision. You don't have to look at the sights. You look only at the target. I have a separate video on this called Target Focus Shooting. If you're interested in the technique and want to try it, I suggest you look at the video. If, on the other hand, you don't want to do that, you want to use the traditional method, sight alignment, sight picture, it's worked for hundreds of years. So feel free to continue to do that. Almost done. Before we go, I want to cover some miscellaneous things, malfunction clearance, a couple of other items. And thank you for staying with me so far. First of all, pop versus bang. If you get good sight alignment, sight picture, and you press the shot or press the trigger, and you hear a pop, but you don't hear a bang, first of all, don't do this. Don't look down the barrel. Please don't look down the barrel. There's something called a hang fire, and that's where the primer starts to go off, but it doesn't set the gunpowder off. But even though it doesn't set the gunpowder off, it might set 1 or 2 grains to sizzling and burning, and they might set the rest of the gunpowder off, so that the gunpowder doesn't go off, and then it does. Good night, good night, good night. So what you need to do is take the pencil, drop it down the barrel, okay? Now, you put it down the barrel as far as it goes, put your thumb on it, pick it up, put it down, and you can see where it goes. So I'm going all the way through the barrel into the chamber, the start of the chamber. With that one, it goes all the way through, because with the sharpened edge, all right, it goes all the way through there. Do the same thing with a semi-automatic. Take it, drop it down the barrel, all right? Mark it where it is the end, sticking out the end of the barrel. Bring it on the top, and you can see that it's going all the way down to the end of the chamber. So there is no bullet left in the chamber at that point. So the bullet came out, even though it was no bang, it was just a pop. There was no bang, but there was enough force somewhere, somehow, the bullet is out of the barrel. On the other hand, you drop it down and it gets stuck. Then we got a couple of problems. We could have the hang fire, potentially, or what we could have is a bullet stuck in the barrel, and even though you clear an empty cartridge out, the next round you fire could hit the bottom of the bullet that's stuck in the barrel and blow up the barrel of the gun. Probably not hurt you, but probably hurt your investment. So, any kind of malfunction like that, pop versus bang, first thing you want to do, stick something down there and make sure the barrel is clear. Even if you clear the gun and know there's nothing in the chamber, check the barrel. Next, semi-automatics. You can have a couple of problems go wrong with semi-automatics, no fire or a stovepipe jam. Let me come back first and cover what a stovepipe jam is. Stovepipe jam is something that looks like this. Normally happens when the cycling action, for whatever reason, does not eject the empty cartridge from a fired round. Now, frequently that can be because the person is limp wristing it. Instead of having a firm foundation that the recoil and the gun and the cycling action can push against, if you have something like this, it kind of goes like this, gets wishy-washy, there isn't enough force to hit for that cartridge to hit the ejector and get flung free. So you can end up with a stovepipe jam sticking up. There's other reasons it could cause it as well. All right? Or you could have no fire, no pop, no bang, nothing. You press the trigger and all you get is a click. In both cases, the accepted manual of arms says tap, rack, bang. And tap, rack, bang is basically tap on the bottom of your magazine so that if the magazine itself was at fault, it was not fully inserted, for example, you're going to fix that. And then rack, and what you want to do is you want to get this cartridge out and a new cartridge loaded. So you rack, that gets rid of the cartridge that was sticking out there. It also cocks the hammer if that needed to be. And now you're ready to fire the next shot. in this case bang. And I will take the magazine out and show you that, in fact, it did load the cartridge as part of that tap rack method. So on a semi-automatic, if it doesn't fire, or if you've got a stovepipe jam, tap rack, you're ready to fire. Normally that will clear an unseated mag or a jam, right? Another thing that could happen is something that's called a nosedive jam. This happens with 1911s, 9mm 1911s, on an ongoing basis. I actually put a video about 9mm 1911 nosedive jams if you have that kind of problem or interested in more information. The 1911 was designed by John Moses Browning on a 45 ACP cartridge, around a 45 ACP cartridge. When you take a 9mm cartridge, you can see how dramatically different they are from a height and from a diameter and from a diameter and a thickness basis. All right, the 9mm design doesn't always work if you have magazines loaded to full capacity. And what will sometimes happen is that the top round, when it is stripped off and is supposed to go up into the chamber, will actually go in front of the magazine and tilt down and get stuck beneath the feed ramp. So it's beneath the feed ramp and it's above the bullet that's next supposed to be coming up. And it'll just push it down. And that pressure right there, pressing up against the bottom, and it's stuck against the bottom of the feed ramp, makes it almost impossible to remove. Basically, what you have to do is lock back the slide so that you can work on it, strip out the magazine, which is sometimes difficult because this is kind of jamming and putting pressure on it, and then clear that round out from underneath the feed ramp. Once you get the magazine out and the slide locked back, it should just drop out. At that point, rack the slide a couple of times to make sure it's clear and working. Reinsert the magazine, rack it once more, and you're back in business. Okay? With the revolvers, pardon me, if the revolver doesn't fire for some reason, you pull the trigger and it doesn't fire, the manual of arms says, pull it again. That's it. All right? Because the action of pulling the trigger rotates the cylinder to a new position, brings a fresh cartridge into position. So if I get a pop, don't do that. If I get a pop instead of a bang, you want to check to make sure there's nothing in there. You want to find out what happened with that pop. On the other hand, if you pull the trigger and nothing happens, there is no pop, there is no bang, just a click, then all you do is pull the trigger one more time. That's it. Okay, sight-in distances. I like to use 15 to 20 yards if I'm using iron sights. If you're sighting in from 5 yards, you're so close that it's almost impossible, if you have any kind of foundational skills at all, it's almost impossible not to have good tight groups. So that's not really a valid test. 15 to 20 yards for iron sights. For optics, I like to use 10 yards. Optics are higher above the barrel than iron sights. This increased height changes the ballistic path. Now I'm going to show you two guns, both similar in structure. This is the 1911 I've been using in a lot of the demonstrations, and this is my rival. Now what I'm going to do is kind of put them so the slides are at the same height. And with the slides at the same height, there we go. Look how much, it wasn't being fair to it. There we go. The front sights are about equal, and look how much higher the optic sight is at the rear than the sight on the 1911. And that situation, as I said, changes the ballistic path. So I like to sight them in at 10 yards. That's what works for me. But once you've sighted them in for 10 yards, verify at 15 and 20 and see what's happening. We've covered a lot of ground, hopefully providing you with some approaches to consider as you build on the base concepts expressed in part 1 of my video series here. Spend the time at the range. Find out what works for you and your gun. Get to know it. Develop some real shooting skills. As a next step, consider looking for an action pistol match near you. GPA, IDPA, USPSA, and other organizations conduct matches on an ongoing basis. Take your eyes and ears and check it out. It's not only fun, participation will hone your skills and maintain muscle memory. Shooting is a perishable skill if you only do it once or twice a year. As always, thanks for watching, and shoot safe.